Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. Welcome to another one in my Devon series. Today we're in the city of Plymouth. We're actually just off Mutley Plain, and this is Drake's Place, which is a reservoir. It's actually built in around 1828. It had Drake's Leat, as in Sir Francis Drake, which he built a leat coming down from Dartmoor, and that brought water into this area, this part of Plymouth, because around Mutley Plain, it's really hard to imagine that now, it was full of mills, and the water came down from Dartmoor to provide water for the mills that surrounded this site here in Plymouth. But later on, 1800s, this was built as a reservoir to serve water for the growing city of Plymouth. It was also used during the Second World War because of all the incendiary bombs that landed on the Plymouth, and they needed to get water to get those fires out. But that's not the reason I've come to show you here in Plymouth today. In Elizabethan times, it was only 7,000 people that lived in Plymouth here in Devon. Now it's well over 265,000 people. It's a really large city, and it's the second largest city that I cover in the West Country Wanderings region, Bristol being the largest. I think now that's getting up to 600,000 just on the city alone. But yeah, we've got this fantastic space here, Drake's Place. We also have gardens around here. So this area here was restored a few years ago, and I used to live in Plymouth, and I seem to remember them starting to restore this, and I think it was completed probably about 8 or 10 years ago. Drake's Garden here. Behind me here, that is the University of Plymouth. Occupies many buildings in this part of Mutley Plain, just a little bit north of the city centre itself. And it's really good to see this recreated because you've got all these different plants that are around here. But what about Drake's Leat itself? Well, let's just have a look at this. Now, there is an interesting story about the restoration of these gardens because they're restored by Tresidder Nurseries of Truro, just over the border in Cornwall, of course. But there is a tale about Tresidder Nurseries, and that is 3 brothers left Cornwall. And I think this was but in the time that the tin industry was in decline, and they went over to Australia for mining interests. And when they went over there, they took some plants with them. You certainly wouldn't be able to take in plants through border control into Australia these days. It just wouldn't be allowed. But they took them over there, and one of the brothers, I think he was called John, set up a nursery in Sydney in Australia, New South Wales, and started his own nursery business there. It then has carried on both in Australia and also in Truro. But yes, these were completely restored by Tresidder Nurseries of Truro in Cornwall. But to remember Drake's famous leat coming down from Dartmoor, when this was restored and completely built, you have this fountain there. I don't know if you can make that out. So when the reservoir overflows, it goes, percolates across through that wonderful fountain here in the gardens, and then down this here, recreating the leat itself. Now, if you go on to Dartmoor, you can see lots of places where the leat is visible on the moors. So the plants include maple like this one. There's also lots of subtropical plants here, lots of palm trees, and down here, some of my favourites. I love seeing ferns. So as you can see that there, a whole bed of ferns there. So that's tremendous to see in these restored gardens just outside of the city centre. But that's not why I've decided to come to Plymouth today. I was actually visiting my daughter just over the border into Cornwall, Liscar, which is about 15 miles away, and we caught the bus here into Plymouth. And just a bit down the further there was something rather spectacular, but it's rarely seen on YouTube's visits from Plymouth. So I thought today we'd come and have a look at that. So let's go and have a look. where I'm currently filming a video in Plymouth, in probably the most unusual place I've ever done a video here on West Country Wanderings. This is the remains of Charles Church, which sits right in the centre of a roundabout opposite Primark. Yes, you heard that right. Sadly, this was bombed in 1941. It was a key church in this part of Plymouth. And after the Second World War, they debated whether to completely flatten what you see today, or whether to leave it as a memorial to the people that lost their lives in the Second World War. Now, what's a shame about this is that it's really, really difficult to access it. Because it's in the centre of a roundabout, I had to kind of time it really well and look at the phasing of the traffic lights, so when it was safe to cross. There's 3, maybe 4 lanes of traffic to get across here, but I managed to get in. It's going to be tricky. Probably have to wait 5-10 minutes before it's safe to get back out again, so if you're coming, be really very careful. But it doesn't say that you can't get on to the island. We have this wonderful church here. I'll do some more shots of the church so you can see it in its full glory from a bit further away from the church, or from the roundabout island itself. See if I can get a vantage point of that. Just found something though really, really spectacular, and links this place, like we saw with the gardens earlier, to Cornwall. Now, aside from the fact that Cornwall is clearly just the other side of the Tamar, outside from Cornwall, there is a real link, and it's because of this man here, the Reverend Hawker. Now, if you know your Cornish history now, you'll know that name, the Reverend Hawker. He was the vicar at Morwenstow, which is probably about 65 miles to the north of Plymouth in North Cornwall. It's the most farthest northeasterly village. So if you're going to Bude, you keep going up the Atlantic Highway and you get to the coast there. He has his famous Hawker's Hut, and he was quite an eccentric vicar, but much well liked. So what is this plaque doing here at Charles Church in Plymouth? Well, surprisingly, the Reverend Hawker was born here. Now, it doesn't say exactly where here, it just says born here. And he was originator at the Harvest Festival. You're probably all familiar with that. If you attend church regularly, or you go into a church around harvest time, you see all the fruit and the vegetables laid out. He started that. But it says that he was born at this church. Whether he was born inside the church or in the grounds of the church, no one seems to know. The other thing about this church and the remains of it is that the churchyard was around the church, like most of them are, of course. But of course, that is now a roundabout. So what happened to the gravestones? Well, I'm not sure. So if you do know, if you know your Plymouth history, do you know if the bodies were taken out of the ground before they laid the tarmac that surrounds this church here now? And do you know if the gravestones themselves, the slabs of granite and slate, were they kept and put into another cemetery somewhere else? I don't know the answer, and I can't find the answer to that out. But it is interesting to think about the people that would have once come here, and there would have been funerals around this area before the Second World War laid its fatal blow to the church here in Plymouth. After the Second World War, St Andrew's Church became the mother church of the city of Plymouth. Famously, that also got struck by bomb, but not so fatally as the one here. And it has the Latin word resurgam, resurrection or rise again, above the entrance door. The problem was, though, that St Andrew's Church was and is a high church, having high mass. But the church here at Charles Church, it was named after the King Charles, we've come across many times before here on West Country Wanderings, was a pagan church. It was a low church. So a lot of the parishioners that had not only lost their church when this was bombed in the Second World War, also lost the heart and the soul of the place as well. Now there's lots of interesting stories to tell, not only about the architecture of this church, but about some of the vicars and the clerical team that worked here before the Second World War. And I think that's as of interest, as well as the building itself, to serve as a memorial to all the lives lost here in Plymouth during the Blitz. I'll put a link in the description of today's video giving you more information about some of the clergy that worked here, as well as more information about the Reverend Hawker. Now next year I do hope to go back to North Cornwall and we'll have a look at the Reverend Hawker's church there at Morwenstow. So that's it for today, here on West Country Wanderings in the city of Plymouth in Devon, in the centre of a roundabout. Not often that I can say that. Hope you enjoyed the trip today. Take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you on the channel again very, very soon. All the best for now. Cheers now, bye bye.
Thank you.